Modern society has declared war on masculinity. Men, as they once were, are being systematically erased. The very qualities that defined masculinity for generations are now considered toxic. Strength is labeled as aggression. Leadership is branded as dominance. Even basic traits like stoicism and self-reliance are ridiculed as outdated and harmful. The war on masculinity is happening right before our eyes, and yet most of society is blind to it. This isn't just about cultural shifts or changing norms. It's a calculated effort to reshape men into something new, something weaker, something controllable. If you control masculinity, you control society. That's the real game here. But why, and who benefits from this? We live in an age where everyone's feelings must be protected at all costs. Any form of assertiveness is seen as threatening. Schools now teach boys to suppress their natural instincts to compete and take risks. It starts early. Boys are punished for roughhousing or expressing frustration. They are medicated into submission. Any sign of typical boyhood behavior is diagnosed as a problem to be fixed. Society is teaching boys that masculinity is something they need to apologize for, something to hide. Look at how the media portrays men today. Gone are the rugged, stoic figures of the past. What do we see now? We see bumbling, weak, and directionless men who are ridiculed by their wives or girlfriends on screen. It's a far cry from the strong male archetypes that once filled movies, books, and television shows. There's a clear agenda to emasculate the image of men. A strong man threatens the status quo. A weak man is easy to control. But the war on masculinity runs deeper than media or education. It's embedded in modern relationships. Men are being conditioned to believe that their natural role as providers or protectors is no longer needed. Women don't need men anymore. At least, that's what society tells us. And yet, the data paints a different picture. The collapse of traditional families, skyrocketing divorce rates, and increasing depression among both men and women are stark reminders that something is deeply wrong. Men are told they must be more vulnerable, more emotionally open, more sensitive. But here's the twist. When men do exactly that, they are often punished for it. A man who shows vulnerability is seen as weak. A man who cries is seen as unstable. Men who follow this new script find themselves even more isolated and confused. They're told to open up, but when they do, they're left stranded. At the same time, men are being told to step back and let women lead. The rise of feminism, while empowering women, has come with the unintended side effect of devaluing men. There's nothing wrong with empowering women, but this movement has turned into a battle for dominance, not equality. We've gone from wanting to level the playing field to actively knocking men off it. What started as a quest for balance has turned into a zero-sum game where men must lose for women to win. Corporate culture reflects this shift. Men are no longer promoted based on merit alone. Quotas and diversity initiatives push them aside to make room for anyone who isn't male. This isn't just about opportunity. It's about systematically reshaping the power structure. The message is clear. Being a man is a disadvantage. But it's not just in the workplace. Even in day-to-day interactions, men are walking on eggshells, afraid that any expression of masculinity might be misinterpreted as harassment or worse. This fear silences men and erodes their confidence. This brings us to the deeper question: why? Why has modern society turned against men? There's a clear agenda here. Strong men, historically, have been the ones to resist tyranny, defend freedom, and protect their communities. A society of weak men is easier to manipulate and control. If you want to reshape society, you start by reshaping its men. You teach them to submit, to be passive, to step aside. You create a generation of men who are unsure of themselves, who question their own instincts, and who no longer feel they have a rightful place in the world. What we're witnessing is not just the emasculation of men, but the dismantling of the very foundation of society. Strong families, built on strong men and women working together, are the backbone of any thriving civilization. When men are weak, families crumble. And when families crumble, society collapses. Some argue that masculinity in its traditional form is no longer necessary in the modern world. We no longer need hunters or warriors, they say. But that's a short-sighted view. The world is still dangerous. Threats still exist. Men are still needed to stand between chaos and order, yet we're actively discouraging them from doing so. The decline of masculinity is linked to the rise of nihilism and purposelessness among men. Without a clear role to play, without the pride that comes from fulfilling that role, men are left adrift. They turn to distractions, video games, drugs, porn, anything to fill the void of a life without meaning. We tell them to get in touch with their emotions, but we never give them the tools to handle the intense loneliness and despair that comes from being sidelined in a world that no longer values them. And when men lash out, we're quick to blame them. Mass shootings, violence, extremism, we point to toxic masculinity as the cause. But what if it's the exact opposite? What if it's the lack of healthy, strong masculinity that leads to these crises? When men are deprived of their natural role, they often overcompensate in unhealthy ways. We're creating a generation of broken men, and then we wonder why they break things. Society has never needed strong men more than it does now. Yet, we're doing everything possible to destroy the very idea of what it means to be a man. This isn't just about men losing their identity. This is about the unraveling of civilization itself. The qualities that built the modern world, strength, resilience, courage, are under siege. So, where does that leave us? Are men supposed to just give in, accept this new, neutered version of masculinity and fade quietly into the background? Or is there a path forward where men reclaim their role, not just for themselves, but for the good of society? The answer lies in rejecting the lies we've been fed about what it means to be a man. Men must rediscover their strength, not as oppressors, but as protectors. They must reject the false narrative that masculinity is inherently toxic and instead embrace its true form. This means being strong, yes, but also disciplined, honorable, and courageous. It means stepping up, not stepping aside. If society continues down this path of weakening men, we'll see the collapse of everything that has made civilization possible. A future without strong men is a future without hope. The war on masculinity is real. The question is, will men fight back, or will they surrender their place in the world?